Many ways of living do not work well. They simply don't. How do we know this? Well, we are in a very privileged position as doctors to see many different attempts at living. How are people living? And the results of their day in, day out habits show up to us as patients. It's like, oh, check that out. Okay, you unfortunately ate too much, exercised too little, got obese, got diabetes. Okay. That's a result of living in a way that doesn't work. Now, I get that there are many diseases that we don't have an answer for why they happened, but some of them we do. So, hey, if you do this over and over and over, then you will get this result. And some results are quite painful to experience. They lead to disease. They lead to problems that human being suffers because of choices that were made repetitively over and over. Now, I've been interested in this conversation for a long time. And I think it first showed up around the idea of rich dad, poor dad. I'm like, okay, hang on. Here's a gentleman saying that behaviors with money lead to particular outcomes. And he said there's only really 3 outcomes that could happen. One is poor, and this is how poor people's money flows. One is middle class. This is how middle class people's money flows. And rich people, and this is how their money flows. And if I wanted to be poor, then I should utilize the way that poor people do it. And if I want to be middle class, then I should utilize money how middle class people do it. If I want to be rich, then I should utilize money how rich people do it. And he wrote this down. He's like, hey, check this out. This was an important conversation for me. Why? Because I see that money allows things to be done. Right now, I'd really like to go to Maui. I'm like, you know what? I'd love to go to Maui. I like Maui a lot. There are particular things there that are very difficult to achieve where I live right now. Like, don't get me wrong. I live in Byron Bay. It's epic. It's amazing. I mean, check this out. This is my, look at that. That's my, oh, it's not quite working. There we go. I mean, that's my backyard there. It's pretty nice. It's a hill that goes down. There's a pool. There's other people on the property that rent from us. It's sweet. It's very private. It's a very wonderful place. But right now, Maui's on sale. There's flights for $1,000. And right now, my money game is preventing that. I'd really like to take my daughter. I took both of my children, my 2 sons, when they were 7. But then when my daughter was 7, COVID was on. You couldn't travel. But that requires money. And this conversation, though, repeats not just in the area of money, but across all aspects of life. And we see it in our patients. And some patients are really good at making one aspect of life work. But to get all aspects of life working, I mean, this is a challenge. This is a challenge. How do I get my body working? How do I get my spirituality working? How do I get my business working, my money game working? How do I get my family working? And as a father, that leadership of my children, leadership of my wife is a particularly challenging game. My father just died about 6 weeks ago. Very wonderful man, but also didn't have many of the resources that are available now. And yet the game is also dramatically more difficult now. Leadership of children, leadership of teenagers, leadership of 20-somethings, they are behaving in ways. There are clear signs that we have problems in our society. Number of people wanting to get married, on the decline. Number of people wanting to have children, on the decline. Addictions, up. Problems, up. People not wanting to work, up. And COVID certainly had an aspect in that. It certainly threw a giant wild card into society. It's like, hey, everything that you thought was not possible to change, that can all change. Like that. Like that. Oh, you can't travel anymore? You can't travel unless you get vaccinated? You can't travel without a mask? You can't do that. You can't go into another state. We're going to put police blockades and block you there. It's like, whoo, baby. Now, It does seem like it's getting warmer. We are likely to see more virulent particles running around. If you go to a greenhouse, there are more things growing than if they're not. So it's likely we're going to keep having problems, but to restrict people and tell them what to do, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. But the overall conversation that I was interested in is, well, what works? And I would take leadership from people who had found things that worked. This was a very successful strategy. It worked really well. Anything from even buying this property. I remember talking to my surrogate grandparents. I was like, hey, I'm really worried that if I buy this, it's going to go down by 200 grand. I'll be 200 grand in the hole. I have to sell it, and I have a debt of $200,000. And these were the thoughts. And they said, you know what, Tom, just buy it. Just buy it. And my life, to a degree, has come down to the ability to purchase this property, fund this property. Like that, it's really odd that my life would come down to, if we don't buy this property, perhaps we bought something else. I mean, that's a possibility. But being a doctor facilitated a higher rate of debt than was normally available. I think we were able to buy it on a 10% deposit instead of the normal 20. That was wonderful. I did not know that when I signed up to be a doctor. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, you get all these benefits? And they're like, yeah, because you're a doctor, you can have consistent income. My father actually shared that. He said, Tom, you know what? You're probably not going to make as much money in the booms, but when it's difficult times, you will continue to have work. People are always getting sick. People are always going to need healthcare. So don't get too stressed about not making truckloads of money in the booms, because in the difficult times, there's always going to be work. And here's the interesting thing that I want you to consider, that perhaps we are going to face difficult times. And I say that because I look at the world and what has been going on with the money system. And if you're not aware what fiat currency is, basically you can steal from the future to have things now by printing money. And this has been going on at an epidemic level for some time now. And when and if and when that comes crashing down, times will be tough. And people will be looking for what works. And what works right now may not work in those conditions. And that's what I'm prepping for. And perhaps it's dumb. Like, dude, it's all going to be fine. I'm like, great, I hope it is. But just in case, I want to be prepared. I want to have my body working, my family working, my business working, my spirituality working. The ability to listen to God, hear what he has to say, and be able to act on that. This is a practice. Being able to hear is one thing. Being able to act and trust, it takes reps. It takes repetition over and over. And to have consistent methodologies for this, very helpful. Are there ways of accelerating spiritual growth? Yes, definitely. Definitely. But having the daily practices in place means that if times get more difficult than they are right now, I'm ready. My family's ready. It's like, okay, no, let's move. Let's go. We got food. We got the ability to get water. Water right now, getting a little scarce. Hasn't rained here much. We have, I think, a total of 15, 18, and 90. What's that? Like 125,000 liters? So we're getting close to needing some water. And I called up and I'm like, hey, how's it going? I texted. I didn't call. I texted like, hey, I hear it's a little bit trying on the water. They're like, yep, we can get to you in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, I'm glad that we didn't leave it till we ran out of water. We got 15,000 liters spare. I'm like, okay, let's get 2 loads in. Even having the ability to know not to leave it to the last minute is important. How did I know that? Last time we left it to the last minute and they said, yeah, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. Do you know how long 4 to 6 weeks is without water? It's a really long time. And so now I'm like, okay, when the tanks run out, we still want 15,000 liters spare so that we can have that lead time. Yep, definitely want it. How do I pay you? How do I get that money in the bank account so that you can bring water? Electricity and water on this property, critical. But The overall message here is, hey, how do you access learnings of other people so that you don't have to go through the problems and the difficulties that they went to learn those things? This is the core. How can I pay someone to learn what their mistakes were and what worked? Because they probably put 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years in to learn those things. And here's a little tip. Where do you find these? It's in a wonderful location, books. Books, highly condensed records of people's learnings, the problems they faced, the solutions they came up with. Yes, it's all over the internet. Yes, it could be podcasts. Yes, it could be YouTube. Yes, it could be all of these places, but books are worth paying attention to. And we're not seeing it much. We're not seeing it much. Watching my kids trying to study, I'm like, geez, guys, you guys need some study techniques. So, question mark for you. What do you see in your patients for strategies of living that doesn't work? What can you learn from their mistakes? How can you leverage that to make sure that if that didn't work, you try something different? And where can you learn from strategies that do work? Just in case it gets a little harder. Now, that's all I got for you. I'm going to cook some mushroom risotto with sweet potato. Very effective. Learnt it from Jamie Oliver. No idea how to cook a risotto, but I follow the recipe and out comes a delicious risotto. So that's what's on the agenda for tonight. Hope you had a great day too, and I look forward to seeing another episode very soon.